So, hello and welcome back to this creative monster design tutorial series. In this series we're going to texture and polypaint this model right here, since we did last time UV map it, and now we're going to polypaint it. This is going to be in Zbrush obviously, and is going to be pretty fun, I think, because polypainting tends to be entertaining. So, let's just jump right into it as we tend to do with these things. So, let's go. So starting off here, we have our high-res model. I have indeed imported the low-res model inside Zbrush there just to have it in with the UVs, so everything there is just fine, and it seems to fit out just well. So this is our high-res, and I'm currently looking for a good material to base the texture off of, and it's quite important to keep to know what material you want, basically. You want to have a good base material, because if you have a bad one, you might, paint oddly. So, I tend to spend a bit of time here first, just, messing around, because obviously playing around with materials tends to be fun as well. So, not bad. Now I'm trying to choose a kind of base color. At this point, I'm not entirely sure how I want this thing to look, so I'm just kind of playing around with different kind of... I know I want it to be kind of brown beige-ish, but I don't really know how, so I think this is going to be a material I like, or maybe I'd change it, I'm not sure. But it's going to be somewhere around this material, and... see now, I chose a base color, and I filled the object with the fill object, obviously in the color palette. So now it has that as its base, and I'm going in with a darker color, with a standard brush with an alpha on it, and I'm kind of just basing the dark sections out, kind of the messing, just clouding. Clouding? Clouding is not a word, but yeah, I'm kind of just playing around trying to paint whatever. You want to... I've said this before in my previous polypainting series, which I did a while ago. Basically, you want to paint in layers, because you want to do a lot of different colors when you polypaint, especially organic things. Generally, I tend not to polypaint mechanical things, but if you do bodies or skin or anything like that, you want a lot of different colors in there, because... yeah, skin has... sorry for that little break there, I had to fix something. Yeah, skin has more colors than you might imagine. It has, purple shades and then green. So that's the same thing with this model here. So I'm currently going in with a quick red color just to base the fleshy bits out, just kind of know what bits are what. And I didn't quite know this at the time, but I ended up going kind of a, not really super cartoony look, but sort of. I like the over-defined look I went for in the end, and... It worked out quite well for me. I mean, obviously, these are things you need to consider when actually doing your own model. Differs from case to case. Personally, I felt it fit with this model quite well. So, don't mind me. And obviously, going in with it. Now I'm going in with really like small brush, kind of really defining what's what. And because obviously you want to be able to look back, zoom out from your model and even have it, tiny thumbnail size and still know kind of what sections are what. So you don't really want sections to blend too much. You want them to stand out as their own little bits. So now I need some more brightish and more saturated color, and even some whites, which aren't going to work out. I'm not going to keep those for too long, but... yeah, so far I'm just using a freehand, brush with a standard brush with an alpha, basically, because the alpha isn't doing too much, but I feel it adds a bit of touch. Now I'm adding a bit of green, which is going to be, I know it looks a bit odd right now, but it's going to be painted over and really kind of processed. So at the end you won't really tell it's there, but you can see that it did do what it's meant to do. Adding a bit of green, or not green, orange highlights here just to make it look a bit better, and stuff like that. So. What I'm doing right now, I'm actually adding quite a bit of purple in, see how that works, and I'm kind of playing around. Polypainting is a lot of playing around. It's basically what it is, and unless you're really, really good and know exactly what you need to do. So now I'm adding some sort of organ-like color, pink, which is I always figured this little bit like it's sort of looking like a kidney or something like that. So I wanted to mimic that color and just add a bit of pink to it, which I think adds a bit more feeling to it. It adds a bit more of that organic feel to it. So now I'm going in. I want the muscle strands here. I want them to kind of blend in with the pink, but I want them to controllably blend in, if you know what I mean. You can see already I have a lot of colors, and too many colors. In fact, right now it looks like someone just slapped on a bit of a lot of crap on there, but I'm going to, in the end, go in and overlay a lot of reds on there, because obviously I want the fleshy bits to look red, and that's going to be the main color, so, you know, that's what it's going to, in the end, be, basically, but right now it's more of a purple shade, which works too. By now it looks more like rotten flesh than anything else, which, you know, could work as well if you feel it, you know, would, but personally I don't really like it too much, and I'm going in with a drag rectangle tool and just dragging a bunch of colors in, and you know, I'm changing between the drag rectangle and the freehand brush quite a bit, which isn't really shown because I've put this on super duper speed, like times 7 or some crazy stuff like that, mainly because the poly painting took a long time, and I didn't really feel like cutting any bits out because they all felt like they belonged, so I chose just to speed it up a lot. I mean, I think it's fine for this bit though, because there isn't a lot of technical work here. It's just a bunch of experimental, kind of artistic, quote-unquote, even though I'm not really an artist, stuff placed here. So that's all well and good, obviously. So you can see I'm kind of defining a lot of highlights. Really, generally when doing these kind of high-res stuff, which you go to bake into normal maps, you don't need to define the really, like, protruding details with light. You don't need to paint in light at all, because the normal map does that for you, the normal and the speckle map. But since I was going with the entire cartoon thing, I kind of wanted to paint a bit, and obviously I was carried away when I realized kind of how fun this was, so I started painting, and I painted a lot, adding a bit of highlights in there, and I'm going to be adding a bit more red. It's going to end up having more red than that as well, because a lot of that is kind of deep shades of red. I need a bit more light, I think, so that's what's going to happen. I'm not sure if it's soon, but it's going to happen eventually. So yes, indeed, we're oh god, I'm dying here. So yes, I'm going in again, detailing all the fleshy bits, and just having a bit of fun doing that. I'm currently moving around my room, so if you can hear that, I'm sorry. I apologize very, very much. But yes. Eventually we are going to move away from this little bit here, but I don't know, poly painting, I know it's probably not good doing it, but I tend to like boggle down on one little section at a time. That's kind of the thing I have going for me, and I don't know, I guess it's probably better to do it overall, you know, on all bits on all times, but I tend to kind of just get excited when I do one of these bits, and I want to make it good as quickly as possible. And you can see there, I did use the drag rectangle tool. It is so quick, you might not even see it, but yes, I'm dragging it in. It gives a good kind of, it's good for blending edges of things, I think, the drag rectangle with an alpha. And setting colors, I tend to just use the, when you know, click on the color palette thing and then drag onto the model where the color is and then select that color. Can be built-in color picker. I tend to just use that to get all my colors, and you know, that's fine. Here I'm playing around with kind of making this a bit darker, the fleshy bits, which isn't really working out too well. I'm eventually going to make it a bit more red, but I don't think I'm doing that just yet. So yes, am I moving on to some other bit now? Oh yeah, I am. Okay, so I'm doing the flap right now, going in with the drag rectangle with an alpha, and just basing, again, just kind of putting in very basic shadows and kind of dark spots. I tend to start off doing that with pretty much all of my poly painting, because I find it just generally gives a good representation of kind of what your forms are and kind of where you want them to be, if you know what I mean, which hopefully you do. It's just something that it's an easy start generally. It's kind of like painting in your own ambient occlusion, if you know what I mean. And personally, since generally getting started poly painting I find to be the hardest bit, generally after you've gotten started everything kind of comes smoothly. I tend to, it's nice to have kind of that set startup line. Here I'm kind of playing around with how much I want to define these little ridges I have going on the top of the flap here. I think this is a bit much, obviously, and I think I've even realized that myself at this point, but I'm going to try it out still, see how it looks. Again, this is a lot like the sculpting process. It's very experimental. I don't have any kind of a... I do have some references up of like skin and alien kind of tissues and stuff like that, and skeletons, but I don't have any specific thing in mind when texturing this thing. So now I'm adding a bit of purple, see how that looks. Not like really purpley purple, if you know what I mean. It's very desaturated purple. Now there's some really dark kind of greens, and I like adding a lot of color with the drag rectangle too, and then kind of going in with the base color of your model and then kind of erasing out with the drag rectangle again, just kind of get a very, very slight hint of that color left, but generally not as much. So you can see what's going on right here. It's kind of purpley green. It's a bit colorful, I think, at this point. I'm going to have to tone it down eventually, but you know, the start of this is kind of fine, even though it kind of looks like some sort of weird prostitute's makeup. I don't know. It looks a bit odd, but yes, I'm adding a bit of oranges and a bit of warmth to it. You want to kind of keep in mind what you want to be warm looking and what you want to be cold looking. Obviously, the colors representing those two sensations being blue and red. So generally, I tend to keep this model. I want to keep kind of. I want the fleshy bits to look warm. That's generally what I know. The rest I'm not entirely sure about. I want the rest to look good. I know. Yeah, it's surprising. But yes, you see, I'm doing pretty much everything here with the drag rectangle. Even though it might not look like it, I am indeed using it, and it is. I tend to use it a lot when polypainting because I find that it gives a really good result. It does go faster just using your brush and with a freehand stroke, but I find that it using the drag rectangle, it retains more the alpha than if you just use freehand with an alpha. So I prefer that. So here I'm toning down the definition. I'm kind of going in and reinstating that base color that we have into the middle of the flap, because I think that looks nicer, and you know, already this looks kind of good. I do like this kind of deep purpley look to the skin, because I think that looks a bit natural, kind of quite nice. So I think I'm going to do the fleshy bits now. Am I? I'm not sure. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. But I think I'm saving now. Actually, what am I doing? I'm not entirely sure. It's for some reason paused it. That's very odd. There we are. Odd pause. I thought I probably was doing something else then. But yes, I'm going to base in the fleshy bits here. I probably should have done all the fleshy bits at once if I was really clever and wanted to save time, but you know, I wasn't on a time limit, so whenever I'm not on a time limit, when I don't have commission work or anything like that, I tend to just, you know, forget everything about what I know about keeping, you know, under time, because I like, it's a nice feeling having a lot of time doing these things. So again, trying adding some really small highlights here. Again, you don't really need to add any highlights when you're polypainting if you have a normal map proper, but you know, personally, I just wanted it to look like that. It looks nice. And if nothing else, it's more color variation, and you know, it looks fine. You want those. I kind of want these bits to glow, which is why I'm adding a bit of more light into it. And I want the other fleshy bits to do that as well, which is I'm going to fix later on. But glowing flesh, I mean, not literally glow. I'm not going to add a glow map and make the flesh glow. I'm not going to do that, but I want the colors to kind of pop. And here you can see I have this little fleshy bit in the middle. I'm going to actually call that pink, because I've decided that the pink there is my organ color. That's my kind of fleshy organ color. That's basically what it is. And I'm going to use that on all the kind of organ bits, surprisingly enough. So this bit right here is a bit more desaturated than its cousin to the right there, but I think I'm going to fix that here in a bit. Or maybe I'm keeping a little bit of this, I'm not entirely sure about that. But it's very free, it's very free form and very kind of, I hesitate to say creative, but it is pretty creative. Here I added a bit of black as well to kind of define really what lines are what. You see what I'm doing right here, adding a bit of black, because I like the kind of outline-ish look of it. It's not entirely, but I do like that it's different looking. Again, I found a little fleshy bit there, so I'm going to color that in, and there's a bit to the left there which I'm not showing, which I'm going to color in as well. And I'm kind of mimicking what I did with the Damon Stand brush with the dark highlights. I'm kind of going around the edges and quickly just dragging them out into existence and making it so that they really define where things start and where things end, because I like the look of that. I'm trying out some different alphas just to see how they look. See, I added more black. I think I did overdo the black a bit here, but it was kind of the case where, oh yeah, this looks good, let's do a lot of it because it's fun. And then you realize it ends up looking like shite. So you can see there's way too much black. But I'm going to fix that here in a minute, I think. I'm really actually happy with this middle fleshy bit here. I'm really, really happy about it, but I'm not entirely satisfied with its brother to the left there. Not entirely happy with it, but it's going to be fixed later on. Also had a bit of red bleed out onto the flap up there, which I haven't removed yet, but I'm probably going to. Then I'm doing some bigger strokes with the drag rectangle tools to kind of get that sort of scaly texture to it, because I kind of like that actually. And I don't want it to be super obvious, though. I'm going to make it a bit more subtle, but generally I tend to find that it looks quite nice like that, really, and therefore I'm going to keep it. It's mine now. It's mine to keep. Yes, it is. So I'm adding it pretty much everywhere. Although obviously I'm overdoing it here, but I'm going in with the same drag rectangle tool, but with the original color and just erasing out some of that, which I think looks fine. I think here I'm going to add a bit of light to these just to make them look more like flesh and more highlights and more red, because obviously I realized that, you know, whilst purple is nice, you don't want it to be just purple. So doing the same trick I did last time with the blackness, doing the kind of separation. See what I'm doing there. Again, I think I'm overdoing it a bit here, but I'm fine with that. Adding a bit of highlights. You see a lot. Those highlights actually do a lot to add to the kind of wet nature of the model. Really, though, you shouldn't have to do that. Again, a specular map or a gloss map or anything like that could do very, very similar things without having it in the actual texture. So going in, you know, kind of found it a bit too obvious, so I kind of smoothed it out. And you can see already we haven't done a lot, but it looks quite nice. Trying to add a bit of light here, it doesn't really end up working too much for me. I try not to actually. This I figured would be kind of interesting to note here. I try not to undo barely at all on the polypainting, because it's easy. It's just as easy to paint over it, and when you do paint over, you might end up having a bit of nice kind of overlapping color. Say if you accidentally paint something really green and you want to paint over that with a base color just to erase it, when you do that, you might be left with a bit of green tint to it in the bottom, and that's quite nice actually. I like that. So what I tend to do is try not to undo too much. Generally, if there's a choice between erasing it and undoing it, I tend to erase it, if you know what I mean. So adding a bit of green here, really green actually. I'm trying it out instead of some dark, and it works out alright. Again, I'm going with the original base color and erasing it out a bit, but I'm going to end up have to desaturate that a bit. It's a lot of playing around with colors. This is definitely, and more fleshy bits. Yes. Generally, this model is actually, the polypainting split into basically three things. You do the fleshy bits, which is the red kind of, muscle-looking stuff. And then you have the skin bit, which is standard skin, kind of darker skin. And then you have the bone, which I haven't shown just yet. But those are basically the three things I do here over and over again. So really, I could probably cut a lot of it out, but I want to show kind of everything, because I want this to be sort of complete experience, if you know what I mean. Which you do know what I mean, don't you? Yeah, you do. You know everything. So, yeah, I'm not entirely super happy with that mesh bit, or flesh bit right there, but yes. I'm going and really kind of defining where the bones are right now, and, a lot of this is actually going to be, oh yeah, I'm actually going to try something out here. This is a technique I use a lot on hard surface stuff. You can see painting the edges like that. It gives off a very kind of cartoony look, and I'm going in with the black, and you can see what I'm doing right there. It gives it off a very cartoony look, but I found it actually worked quite well here with the bones. I'm going to end up doing this with all the three of the bones, and it gives a bit of distinction, and I think it really does fit with the rest. Usually, like, combining different styles like this, which, because obviously the other stuff isn't that cartoony, while it is a bit, it isn't too cartoony. Combining it with this is a bit sketchy usually, but I find it works out quite well here. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look bad. And it was really fun to do. Obviously, this is actually drawing like this, texturing like this is actually a lot of fun. It's not very hard either. I think I used to look at people doing this stuff and think it was really, really difficult, but then I tried it myself. It really isn't. You just need to do a lot of erasing and a lot of back and forthing, and then generally get a good result. It's a similar technique to what you do if you're trying to paint wood. It's a similar type of thing there, although it's a bit more technical if you do wood. But it's quite fun. It's basically just doing scratches and a lot of scratches and highlights and all that stuff. You do a lot of drawing, thick shapes and then erasing them out again, and drawing more thick shapes and erasing them out again, because that makes it look better. You also want to consider where your planes are on your actual mesh you're doing, like where the normals are directed and stuff like that. It's fairly important to know that, although you could probably just wing it just as well. You see what I'm doing right here? I'm kind of choosing what planes there are on that little bit and kind of drawing those in. So yeah, this didn't take a lot of time, and it looks quite nice, really. It's going to fit in quite well when I do the fingers eventually, which I think I'm going to do last for whatever reason. And you know, because obviously these bones are meant to be continuations of the fingers, and I wanted them to really be defined as bones. That's why I'm kind of doing this. Because when I first did it, it kind of didn't look like it. I mean, I figured I just overlay a bone texture or something like that in post, you know, in Photoshop. But this actually works a bit better. I think this looks really nice. So I think I'm done with those now. Not entirely sure. Yeah, now I'm going in with the black again. Trying more of the cartoony style, so I'm going to in and really defining where the folds are. And since I like the cartoon style, I'm kind of trying out to see how it looks on other bits. So I'm adding a bit of black to the corners and stuff like that to the flesh, which it doesn't go too badly really. It works alright. Now I'm going in and doing more of this cartoony kind of bone stuff on the rib cage, because obviously I have to do that as well. And it's a bit more fiddly here because there's so much of it. But again, I'm just going in with a very, very small black brush and defining kind of where things are separated, and then I'm going in. Now I'm adding a bit of dark spots, and now I think I'm going to go in and add the highlights. And you know, a lot of this is why I sped it up, you know, so much, because this is very repetitive work. But I want to show it nonetheless, because I think it's good to know, watch these things. I mean, generally when I watch tutorials, when I used to when I didn't know, when I wanted to learn, say this, and I watched a tutorial on it, they generally just cut out the unnecessary bits. And personally, I found that bit when I was learning, I wanted to just see everything. So I'm trying it out right here. If you don't like it, let me know, and I'll stop. I'll just, you know, make everything as optimal as I can in the future. Or if you like it, I'll just continue doing it like this. But obviously, I did cut out a bit. I mean, this is just for the polypainting, and in other bits, I am going to get rid of the useless stuff, because obviously in modeling and stuff like that, it's very straightforward usually when you do these really repetitive actions. So you can see that in a short period of time we have a very defined kind of what's what, and we have a lot of highlights and a lot of scratches and a lot of messed up stuff, because obviously I'm picturing this guy as having been through a lot, because obviously I don't think he had these fleshy, like, really exposed muscly bits, you know, as when he was born. I don't think he was born that way. I think he's been in battle. He's been in war, and that's what he's gotten these things from. He's a war hero, basically. We should honor him and salute him and give him gifts. And by him, I mean me, so give me lots of gifts. Yes, great logic there, Seb. Thanks, Seb. Oh, God. Yes, indeed. We have a lot of different parts done here. We have just a bit left. I'm going to use symmetry throughout this entire texturing process, I think, except for a bit where, you know, when the geometry obviously isn't symmetrical, I'm not going to use symmetry, but that isn't very, very relevant. If you really want the texture to be unsymmetrical, I tend to just edit it later in Photoshop, just to be easier that way, or, you know, just because how easy it is to manipulate shapes, stuff like that in Photoshop, how I can move things around easier. Generally, my reasoning for that, and it just feels more comfortable to me. I tend to keep Symmetry on all throughout the polypainting because it just speeds things up a lot. And this process is one that I think takes. I mean, this for me took the longest time. It took longer than UV mapping. It took longer than sculpting, and it took longer than everything else. Retopologizing too. So, you know, polypainting is a time sink basically, but and generally everything to kind of relieve the time on that tends to be good. You do want to keep time in mind, because modeling, when you do model at a certain level, time is very, very important actually. So you want to kind of practice getting your workflow as quick as possible, which I'm not doing a very good job of demonstrating right now because this is very slow and very tedious. But again, if you want to get better and you want to do good, you should try and kind of optimize your workflow for the lowest amount of time possible to needed, because generally that is a wanted quality. People want other people to be quick and be fast and effective. Basically, obviously, quality is better before speed, but speed is still very important. Here I'm going again the fleshy section here, right in the middle, which is pretty much actually never going to be shown because the shadows, as it turns out, they tend to cover that area, so you never really look at it. Now looking back at the other bits, everything looks kind of desaturated compared to that, so I'm going to desaturating the instead of saturating everything else, I'm desaturating the little really glowy bit right there. I'm going in and just fixing the last little bone sections I've left. it's a bit much, the highlight right now. I did overdo it here, but I'm going to, in the end, have to clean those up. I don't think I'll show you that, though. I'm not entirely sure. It might be in Photoshop. I do a bit of texture work after this in Photoshop, and just adding a bit of kind of overlaid textures, obviously, and kind of just changing the blend options in there. It's not something I wanted to show because it's seriously not very difficult. It's just getting some, you know, like ground texture or metal textures like off of cgtextures.com and overlaying them, changing the blend modes, you know, masking and stuff like that, and just playing around. So, and I didn't really want to show that too much. Here I'm going in doing the fleshy bits on the inside of the egg, which I am going to spend a bit of time on because they are in fact going to be shown. The eye isn't going to cover these up, so it's important to give them their, you know, deserved attention, I think. Again, you've seen me do this a couple of times. It does differ from obviously each time because I don't have a color palette set or anything like that. I just select what it looks like I used before and use those. So it comes out different every time. That's kind of what one method of painting that I like to do. I tend to like to not have a set number of colors to use. I tend to just like picking from colors I've already used in the actual painting or drawing or text or whatever. It gives a more natural result, and I tend to find it, I prefer it that way. So I'm pinkalizing it, the muscle bits there in the middle, and going in with the dark color, dark black, reddish, really black, but sort of has a red tint to it, and I'm going in and kind of just making it a bit more subtle, defining where the edge is, and eventually I'm going to do a bit of highlights, because now I did it too subtle. I do still want it to be recognized as flesh, and as kind of muscle tissue or whatever in there. Again, this bit here, the little bit there, does look a bit like gums, which was the intention, so that's all good. I'm going to try and add a bit of more black bottom bit more text. Here I've cut to a bit different bit. I have already painted a bit on here now, and I'm going in and doing some really fine detail stuff here with a very, very, very tiny black brush. Again, supporting that kind of the stylized look of this texture so far. I'm kind of trying that out on more bits. This kind of works out, although you need to be subtle with it though, because doing it too much will make it look a bit odd. But yes, I think this actually looks fine, so I'm going to keep this, I think, to the end. Not doing it too extreme, not doing it everywhere. If you do it everywhere, that gets a bit too obvious, and it kind of ruins the niceness of it. All I'm doing is basically, you know, over-exaggerating shadows. That's what I'm doing right now, and generally, since I did all this stuff, the normal map doesn't do as much as it could do. A lot of the normal map work's actually done with the texture as well right now, but I think that's fine. That's more I think it fits. You can see I even did a bit of high surface stuff like that, made it look like a more strength than there are, really defined where the geometry goes with the black brush there. It was very useful. I think it looks quite good as well. I think I'm going to add some highlights now as well. Yeah. I don't think these work out too well though. I don't see these as super good. So I'm going to, you see right there, I dulled them down a bit. Now I'm adding a bit bigger black stuff with the bigger, really obvious kind of shades, and you can see what I'm having right there. It doesn't. I think it could have gone a bit more subtle. I think just looking at it in retrospect, but you know, it's fine. Now I'm going in with a really kind of a bit darker, really soft light here, and define the shadows. This is a bit of old school texturing, kind of painting in where the folds are, but again, I don't need to do it, but I found it fun, so I continue doing it. It adds a bit of more extra detail as well, and it looks nice, so I continue doing it. It is old school though. You generally shouldn't do that, you know, anymore. You don't need to, because you have other images that do that stuff for you, and there's just no need to waste time on it when you're texturing. But you know. Also important to note here, well, sort of important, is that I'm not using symmetry, because obviously this frontal bit here is actually one of the bits on the model which aren't symmetrical at all. And that's just kind of how it turned out when I made the model, really. So you know, it is nice. I really do like that section, because it gives more of an alive look to it. Because obviously having things in symmetrical is one of the best ways to make them look alive. Adding a bit of highlights here. It looks a bit odd now on the left side. I'm going to fix that up here in a minute. Again, I kind of miss the really old school type modeling where you paint everything in. Although obviously this is easier and this is nicer and more fun. But sometimes I just want to play around with colors, and you know, then this happens. So yeah. Again, it's a bit sharp and a bit too obvious on the right side here, which I haven't really quite realized yet. But I'm going to fix that here eventually. So you can, right now I'm kind of smoothing things out, and the black lines are getting a bit extreme, which takes me a while to realize, but yeah. I'm trying to actually make them more extreme, as it turns out. That's kind of another tactic you can do if something turns out a bit odd looking. You can make it even more odd looking and make it an entire art style, which is interesting. Adding a lot of wrinkles and... Whoops. I think I just broke something. Oh, the professional nature of this show or this channel, I know. But indeed. Kind of trying to make a bit of interesting... define a bit of a couple of interesting folds here and there, and you see I am toning things down all the time. I'm going in and taking them all, doing things and removing them and doing things and removing them all the time, because that's generally the way I work, and I find that it kind of sets me in the right mood, as all this that sounds, and it gives me a better result in the end. Again, I think most of this pole painting is personal preference. It's a lot of playing around. It's a lot of fun, basically. You just need to go in there and paint. There are a couple of guidelines you want to keep in mind, obviously, but when you do know those, you can just go in and do whatever you want, really. A lot like sculpting, as it turns out. It's very much like sculpting. I do tend to like doing these. I mean, there are like voxel-based sculptors and voxel-based, polypaint, similar like things, like 3D coat, which I've done a couple of videos of, that do similar things like this. But I prefer doing it in Zbrush, because it's just... you can't really stress the importance of the smoothness of having everything done in one app. As good as it is, maybe, to switch between apps, I tend to like to keep... That's why I like a lot, like using Zbrush over other sculpting tools, because Zbrush does so much, and you can do a lot of things just inside Zbrush, but in other programs you might have to export the model and then import it in somewhere else, and do that in there, and then import it back into Zbrush to do something else, and all that stuff, which does really slow your workflow down, and I like to just keep as much as I can in one software. So obviously that's why I UV unwrap in Maya, that's why I do. I tend to switch between retopologizing in Maya and in Zbrush. It tends to differ, but generally it depends on the model as well. If I have a lot of work done in Zbrush, I tend to just retopologize in Zbrush because it's easier, and if I have a lot of work done in Maya, I retopologize there. Or if I have a lot of advanced UV stuff ahead of me, I tend to retopologize Maya as well, because obviously then I can just stick the low poly in the UV editor and just assign the UVs right away. Going in with a darkish color here to define where, again, I've said this a lot of times, so I'm just defining the flesh here. You probably can understand that, which is going quite well. It's very simple, very simple. It's not difficult. It's not skill. This stuff really. I'm not claiming to be very good at polypainting because I'm not. I'm not very good. I've seen people who are good at it, and they're generally just brilliant artists, and I'm nothing like it. I can barely draw, but I can play around with colors though, and pretty much everyone can do that. Since because of that, everyone can do this. So here I've cut it to a bit of a later section as well. I have these fleshy bits done a bit better, and I think I've changed the material too to another material just to look at to see how it looks. I've done a bit of lighter sections to the bottom there. It doesn't really matter too much. It barely will be shown, but I figured it'll look good because that's the way I picture the inside of the egg to look, kind of pinkish. So now I'm going to do the little oh god, I'm dying here. I'm going to do the tail now. And I think I'm going to cut a lot of the tail out, the process of doing the tail out, because yes, the tail, just like the sculpting process of it is very repetitive. It's doing a lot of the same things. It's fleshy bits and then there are bony bits, and it tends to be like that. So I'm just going in first of all and coloring all the different fleshy bits in red, and then I'm going to go in and add every single little fleshy bit its own highlights and its own color variation and stuff like that. I could have spent more time doing this. I could have honestly done more work on these bits to make them look better, but I was so tired at the end of this. I was so sick of it, because as fun as polypainting is, doing the same polypainting over and over again over like 30 different bits, it gets very slow. So what I did was I did quite a simplified version of the flesh, and then I did a lot of work in Photoshop where it's a bit easier to do these repetitive, kind of mechanical, not really mechanical, but mechanical in technique wise bits. I did it in Photoshop later, which I guess is worth mention. I probably could have shown you that, to be honest, but I didn't in the end. So what I'm doing now is, this is kind of similar to doing armor in Zbrush, you know, doing kind of painting the planes out. Again, it's pretty much exactly what I did on the rib cage, but just in a bigger kind of way. And I'm going to do this on pretty much every bit, and then I'm going to go in and do the flesh bits, and it's going to take ages, but it gives off a good result, so hey. No harm down there. And yeah, you tend to just, when you do this stuff, you tend to zone out and just go into your own special zone, because this requires no thought process whatsoever. You really don't need to think while doing this. There's no bit of me that can honestly say that I was keeping a lot of things in mind when doing this. I was just sitting, like, listening to music or watching something while doing it, because it's very, very repetitive, obviously. So you see me doing a bit of highlight work here. Looks alright. Again, you want to. I do overdo it here. It's important to keep that in mind when you actually do these things. If you are polypainting something like a weapon in ZBrush, you don't want to overdo it like this, because then you really want to consider where things would get scratched. Because now I'm just doing every single edge because I'm lazy. But on stuff like weapons, you need to kind of consider where it would get scratched, because weapons are very realistic things, and you want to keep that in mind when doing the texture. It makes the texture very realistic too, and to make it very realistic, you have to kind of visualize, if someone were to have used this for a long time, where would it get beaten up, where would the scratches be, because just putting scratches everywhere isn't realistic, because no one's going to take a gun and just like ram it into a rock cliff wall and just drag it alongside there, just shifting sides and just scratching everything. That's not going to happen. So you need to kind of do like around the trigger, maybe like the suppressor maybe would have some scratches on it, you know, stuff like that, and you know, the barrel would have some scratches as well, and you know, maybe where handle would, again, you know, just thinking like that would be very important to when you're doing mechanical stuff. Saving, posting it on the online on a forum, that's very important as well. Posting it on forum, post your work online to get people to criticize it is very important. Criticism is really important to the modeling process, because just getting a second opinion on your model is really, because when you do work on these things, you tend to work on them for a long time, for long stretches at a time. Well, at least I do, and therefore you get kind of fish-eyed. You get really kind of boggled down. You don't really see it as a whole, and posting it online makes people who's never seen it before kind of give honest first impressions and stuff like that, which gets you really good feedback and generally helps your model a lot. There are a lot of these different online communities. I mentioned this in the previous series as well, but try joining a forum, try posting it there. Of course, you have to be oh god, I can't say that. You need to be able to take criticism, basically. You need to be able to do that, because otherwise you really won't. Because some people get really pissy as if people are just, you know, talking shit about their model, but that's really not what they're doing. They're trying to make you better, and that's an important bit you need to understand. But yes, I haven't even mentioned I'm doing the fingers here, but yeah, again, the fingers are a combination of skin. It does not have any fleshy bits on them, but it's a combination of skin and bone. Again, from the three different things, we had skin, flesh, and bone, and this has two of those things. The bones I'm doing right here, and the skin is, you know, between those. So I am actually ending up doing the polypainting individually on all three of these. I was contemplating just doing it on one and then copying it over in the texture file, but I just couldn't be arsed. It wasn't going to be very advanced anyways. It's just basic skin, and it's not a lot of painting to do, so I just figured I'd do it on all of them. Doing it on all of them is obviously better than doing it on just one and then copying it over, because it gives more of an individual look to each one, and whilst it might be very slight and very subtle, it's still very important to keep that. I mean, not maybe very important, but I mean, it's better that you have it than if you don't, so. I'm focusing these fingers a lot on, you know, purple. I have a lot of purple in these and a lot of brown, but I'm not having as much green or red as I did in the original skin. I'm not entirely sure why. I kind of wanted this to look like a different sort of, a bit dirtier, I guess, than the original skin, because obviously these fingers, I'm not entirely sure, I still haven't figured out exactly what it would do with these fingers, because they're positioned in such a way on the model, or on the monster, that it probably couldn't, it's able to scratch its own eyes with them, and nothing else. So, but I mean, if they're like any other kind of hand, finger type stuff, it's probably used for a lot of things, and therefore it had a bit of dirt on them, because I didn't figure this eye to take showers. It's not something I see it doing. too often. In fact, I don't really see it doing anything because I did it completely unrealistically. But hey, fun is fun. Yes, indeed, it is. So just going in with a tiny brush here, defining these little bony sections. I'm not entirely sure how much of these figures I really do show. I'm not going to show all the process, you know, doing it, but it's all fine. It's all good. Because obviously, yes, you've seen me do skin, and you don't need to see me do skin again, because it's, while I do like showing a lot of, you know, the process, this is literally exactly the same as before, but just on a different bit. Adding a bit of, you know, creases, I guess, here. I could have modeled these in, but I didn't in the end. I kind of forgot to, but you can see what we have here. We have a good base. It looks quite nice when everything's, you know, attached like this. They don't fit it together perfectly, but again, these aren't meant to be shown generally that much. It's just, you know, since I like it. I did a bit of darkness right around the edge there, saving it. And I think this is actually quite close to the end. We have a bit left on the fingers that I'm going to do, and then we are pretty much done with the poly painting, actually. I know, it's very, very exciting, isn't it? Yes, it is, boys. Yes, it is. You know, doing a bit of dark spots here, playing around, doing a bit of... I'm trying to keep these, the fingertips quite, you know, dirty as well. Again, you can see... I say again a lot, I don't know why. But yeah, you can see that I've done a lot of work with the drag rectangle tool and just using alphas. I've pretty much done the entire fingers like that. And again, that's just because I'm doing it instead of just drawing, because I'm using it as if I'm using a freehand tool, kind of. I'm just drawing you know, lines with it and stuff like that. But I use drag rectangle because it retains, I said this like 10 minutes ago, but it does retain the alpha so well that even if you're just drawing with it, the drawings kind of get this little nice outline of kind of speckly, noisy type stuff, which I like. I really do like. It helps it blend with the rest of the texture and all that stuff. It looks very nice. I did add a bit of green right there. If you're observant enough, you spotted that. I did add a bit of green to the tips, and it does work quite nice. I'm not going to remove that just yet. I'm trying to make the bone bits a bit more, yeah, I'm not going in and adding the kind of semi-cartoony elements to it with the black outlines, because it looked a bit undefined earlier, and now I'm just going in and defining everything. It's something that, if I'd been really dedicated, I could have just done the entire thing with a really kind of hardcore cartoony style to it, like Borderlands style, art style, but I kind of just blended the two, and it kind of worked out quite well, I think. Yeah, and you can see now we're almost done with the fingers here. We're almost done. Going in and defining more, and they look quite nice already, really. So you can see there, and I think this is it. I changed the material there, and I'm going to do a bit of rendering stuff here. And this is actually the end of the tutorial, so I thank you for watching this quite long series, this quite extensive series, I think. And I know it's a bit similar to what I did before, but I want to kind of show you a different approach to it. And so this is the final product. I changed all the tail is what I changed the most by the end, but yes. So yes, at the end here, what we're presented with is a high poly model with a polypaint texture on it. And then what I do after this is basically just export the texture to an image, and then use XNormal, which is a software I'm going to do a tutorial on later, to bake the model, the low poly, into an ambient occlusion map from the high poly to the low poly and a normal map, and then just put them all together and add a bit of bone texture to the tail. So that's pretty much what I do. After this, we have a perfectly presentable model, and you know, that's all good, well and good. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And do like, comment, and subscribe and all that if you do want to. If you don't want to, you can dislike, and you can not comment, and you can unsubscribe. However, I preferred if you did the prior. So yes, thanks.